What if the most chilling clue in the Epstein case wasn't a name on a flight log, but a candle no one noticed? Before we go any further, subscribe to Fame and Frame, like this video and drop your thoughts in the comments, because what you're about to hear is a detail buried in the shadows of one of the most controversial investigations in modern history. When authorities entered properties linked to Jeffrey Epstein after his 2019 arrest, the world focused on the obvious: documents, digital files, photographs. Headlines exploded. Court filings poured out. The media dissected every name. But investigators also cataloged something quieter, something atmospheric. Candles. Not just decorative pieces, but carefully placed, staged, almost ritualistic in their positioning, according to evidence, photos, and property descriptions that later circulated in public reporting. In rooms already heavy with disturbing artwork and unusual decor, the candles felt deliberate. Why does that matter? Because context matters. Inside Epstein's Manhattan townhouse, one of the largest private residences in New York, reporters described walls lined with surreal, provocative art, odd sculptures, symbolic imagery, and in multiple rooms, low lighting created by strategically placed lamps and candles. Soft light, flickering shadows, a controlled environment. Investigators never publicly framed the candles as criminal evidence. There's no official statement claiming they were tied to wrongdoing. But environment shapes psychology. Lighting sets tone. And in a case defined by power, secrecy, and manipulation, even atmosphere becomes a question. Then came the aftermath. Epstein's arrest in July 2019, his detention at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, and his death weeks later ruled a suicide, sparking global controversy and endless debate. The files connected to him, often referred to as the Epstein Files, continue to fuel investigations, lawsuits, and speculation involving high-profile figures. Every new court unsealing ignites fresh headlines. But here's the part no one lingers on. Details reveal patterns. Patterns reveal intent. And intent reshapes how we interpret everything. Why create rooms bathed in dim, intimate lighting? Why the deliberate aesthetic? Was it control? Psychological influence? Or simply personal taste exaggerated by media coverage? Former associates have described environments that felt carefully curated. Survivors have spoken in court about manipulation and coercion. Prosecutors outlined a pattern of grooming and abuse. So when you look again at those rooms, the artwork, the placement, the glow, you start to ask a different question. What else have we overlooked because it seemed too small to matter? In investigations this complex, sometimes it's not the loudest detail that changes perspective. It's the quiet one. And as more documents continue to surface, as more testimony is examined, one thing becomes clear. The full story isn't just about who was there. It's about the environment that made everything possible. And the candle detail? It might not prove anything on its own, but it forces a deeper look at the psychology behind the power. Because in rooms designed to control perception, even the lighting can become part of the narrative. What investigators saw in those flickering shadows, and why it matters now, is a layer most people haven't considered. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The full breakdown changes everything.
The room was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. Not peaceful. Not calm. Controlled. When investigators stepped deeper into the Manhattan townhouse, once owned by Jeffrey Epstein, they weren't just cataloging evidence. They were documenting atmosphere. Because sometimes the smallest details tell the biggest stories. The chandeliers were grand. The ceilings stretched high. The walls carried expensive art that seemed chosen to impress. But it wasn't the paintings that lingered in memory. It wasn't the marble floors or the velvet furniture. It was the candles. Not one or two placed casually on a dining table. Dozens, strategically positioned. Shelves, corners, mantels, side tables. Some unused. Some burned halfway down. Some melted unevenly, wax hardened like frozen tears along their edges. Investigators noted them, photographed them, logged them. Candles aren't illegal, but environment matters. In legal psychology, atmosphere is often described as a silent participant. It shapes behavior. It alters perception. It lowers defenses. It amplifies power dynamics. A dimly lit room can make someone feel smaller, softer, less certain. And in files connected to the case, descriptions of lighting kept surfacing. Low light, soft glow, curtains drawn. The candle detail didn't headline newspapers. It wasn't explosive like flight logs or court testimonies. It was subtle, almost forgettable. But subtle things are sometimes intentional. One former visitor described the rooms as theatrical. Another mentioned that time felt distorted inside, as if the outside world had been dimmed away. The lighting wasn't harsh or clinical. It was curated. Candles flicker unpredictably. That flicker draws the eye. Hypnotic. Distracting. Investigators are trained to look for staging. Not just crime, but presentation. How a space is arranged tells you about control. And control was a word that appeared repeatedly throughout proceedings tied to Jeffrey Epstein. In court discussions, prosecutors argued that environments can be engineered to influence comfort levels and perception. A well-lit office creates transparency. A shadowed room creates intimacy, or secrecy. And secrecy was the backbone of everything. The townhouse in New York City wasn't the only property where mood lighting played a role. Reports from other estates described similar setups. Heavy drapes, layered lamps, and candles positioned not for decoration, but for effect. It wasn't about scent. It wasn't about decoration. It was about mood. Psychologists often discuss how lighting affects authority. In dim settings, the person who controls the space holds power. They know where everything is. The guest does not. The host moves confidently. The visitor adjusts. Candlelight softens features. It blurs sharp lines. It hides small reactions. And in situations built on manipulation, blurred clarity can be useful. The detail seems small until you imagine walking into that room for the first time. You don't see everything clearly. You don't feel entirely grounded. Your senses adjust. That adjustment period, even seconds long, shifts balance. Investigators don't just collect objects. They collect patterns. And patterns tell stories. Why so many candles? Why consistent low-light design across properties? Why descriptions of staged ambience repeated by different individuals who had never spoken to one another? There are no charges tied to candles. No indictment for ambience. But context matters. Files are more than transcripts. They are snapshots of environment, power, psychology. The candle detail is chilling not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. Control isn't always loud. Sometimes it flickers quietly in the corner of a room, barely noticed, until someone starts asking why it was there in the first place. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.